Well, good day, folks, and welcome back to The Secret Solve. This is a program where we take this book and we try to figure out what the authors, the artists, and the people that created the puzzles for The Secret were doing back in the 1980s. And so today I'd like to talk a little bit about San Francisco, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the Huntington Park area. Now, unfortunately, I'm not like one of these professional YouTubers. I'm just a guy with a book. And so I'm going to take the approach that I'm just going to tell you. I'm looking at the Huntington Park area. And I'm looking at it because of some clues that I think visually match the image figure. And most importantly, I think that you can find the top of the Mark or the Mark Hopkins Hotel in the background of that image. And if you take that possibility and expound upon it and look at some other features of this area and the image, for instance, the pearl. So, what is it that creates pearls? They come from the ocean, they come from a shell, if you will. And so there's a pearl in the image. There's a rose in the image, if you will. There's what people have said is a lamppost in this image that's recognizable. Obviously, there's this tabletop design. Uh, there's a clock in the image. There's maybe a silver tea kettle, if you will, in here. Um, are those dollar-sized pancakes up there in the top? I don't know. Uh, some people identify this uh, building, if you will, as maybe being the Fairmont. Uh, Definitely, there's several buildings in the general area of Huntington Park that look like the part of the image around C. I think that the hands are actually giving you a C and maybe an I or an F. Uh, the woman is wearing not a kimono. This is a religious ceremony type of outfit. And her arms are crossed, the arms and the figure design basically make a cross, if you will. Um, in the image below the, let's say, window at the top, there is definitely a pedestal of some sort or a tower of some sort. Uh, Other people have matched some of these other features, so I'm not going to go discuss every single one of them. But I think that if you look at Huntington Park and you go to this fountain that's in the middle of the uh, park, you've got these seashells, and you've got like four of them. And if you walk around this fountain, you can click on it. If you're in Google Earth, you can just pan around it. And you've got four of those seashells. Then you've got the four images around it. And then you've got these tortoises at the top. And if you actually look at the base of the fountain in Huntington Park, you can match it to the image table base that you're looking at. Now, just imagine putting a clock on top of that. And I'm not sure exactly what the clock would be for at this point. Well, let's just say you put a clock on that. Um, you can pan around and look in the park if you're here. You see the Grace Cathedral. I think that there's a design in the back of the book that is very reminiscent of that Grace Cathedral. There's a sign. These poles in Huntington Park look a lot like uh, the vases at the top of those posts. Look very familiar to part of the image figure. But if you just work around here, you've got this building that's got an Asian design to it. It's kind of a smaller building that you can see in the background. Uh, and I think that looks a little bit like the back of the book where you've got um, let's just say a phone booth, if you will. And we're going to talk about that as we go along. Uh, And just looking through the whole entire thing here, you can get to where you look at the top of the Mark building, and then you look at the Huntington Hotel. And if you look at the sign, the Hotel Huntington, if you are in the park and you're looking at the sign, it gives you the backwards letters that you see in the image figure. So looking at the image figure, and you've been trying to figure out why are all of those letters seem to be backwards, the G and H and all that. Well, what if you're looking at, from Huntington Park, the sign that's the Hotel Huntington sign, and that's why your G is backwards, and that's why your H is backwards, and that's why all of your letters appear in a backwards manner. I think that there's also a water tank, if you will, in the background here, but I'm not exactly sure if that's the. So that would be your, possible water tank. People like to have water towers in these solves, etc. So let's just go through a little bit of information about this area and why I think this is. So if you look at the Huntington Hotel and you look at the entryway door to the Huntington Hotel and compare that to the door that's featured in the background of the image, I like that door probably as good as any other match possibly for this. And so if you would turn around from that door and look, you would have the Grace Cathedral. You'd be looking down California Street. I believe this is the street that the cable cars run on, right? And if you would do some address researching, you would find that 982 California is very proximate to this. Well, let's just say you're standing at Huntington Park, and you're going to look towards that door on the Huntington Hotel, which has a little flag above it. Oh, by the way, did you notice how that image there looks? So there's a stairway that goes up to Huntington Park that's directly across the street. And from this location, you can see a detail on the corner post of the stairs that go up to Huntington Park. If you go back to the back of the book and you look at the Screaming Mimi, and I think a lot of the clues I think the clues in the back of the book are ordered exactly as the images are to make it easy for you. And so you get, first of all, introduced to the Mater Demon. Well, the Mater Demon is going to be at a hotel or at a hotel restaurant. And the top of the mark has a hotel restaurant. And that hotel restaurant was opened way, way, way back. So if you look at the Intercontinental Mark Hopkins Hotel, in 1939, the 19th floor penthouse suite was converted into a glass-walled, top-of-the-mark restaurant cocktail lounge. Where would you find the Mater Demon hanging out? Would he be possibly at the Top of the Mark restaurant at the Mark Hopkins Hotel in 1939? I'm just wondering if that might be where you might find a Mater Demon. So let's just look a little bit more at the point I was going to make about the Screaming Mimi. So in the back of the book, the Screaming Mimi here is on page 72. So on page 72 of the book, you have the Screaming Mimi. And let's just say you look at that, you've got like a stairway going up to something, and the Screaming Mimi is in the bush there, hiding out. Well, if I look at this area of San Francisco, where I'm right here at the stairway going up, it looks to me like that design is very similar to the design that is on the sidewalk, right where those stairs are. And so I don't know if you can get any indications from the back of the book as to what to look for or to where to look. But if I was going to look in San Francisco, I would go to a point on the map where you are right across from the entryway to the Huntington, which you can see the letters on the top of the hotel when you're standing from this very, very spot where the stairway is. Now, I like this spot a lot by the staircase because of the screaming Mimi in the back of the book. I like it because there's also a mailbox generally proximate to this. I also like it because there's a whistle stop for the train, a train pickup location, a whistle stop, if you will. And so the reason I mention this is because in the back of the book, there are chapters that point out things about San Francisco, and then they point out a mailbox. And then there are things about San Francisco, and then they point out something else that makes sense. And so that's why I think if I was going to look, I would go over to the staircase that kind of goes up to the park, and I try to figure out where there's a water drainage cutout. Now, I've seen these water drainage cutouts as I've looked along here before, and so it's as if the water drains out from that lower level to the bottom level. And there's also this no parking 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Monday sign. Now, I'm not saying that's the location of the sign in 1982 by any stretch of the imagination. But what I'm saying is that in 1982, there was probably a sign that the clock referenced for the 6 o'clock. And maybe the parking regulation back then was 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And that's why the dial of the clock is at 6. But I'm thinking that if you were going to look at these roses, if you will, and I don't know what was planted here in 1982, and I don't even know if this sidewalk cutout was there in 1982. But if you look at the design on that sidewalk cutout, that little rectangular shape, and you look at the position of the screaming Mimi in the bush there, I'm thinking, well, if I was going to find a bunch of stuff that looks like roses in the back of the book, and if I was going to put some image figure somewhere, it would most likely be there. And considering that we're talking about Rosemary's Baby, if you will, and there's a rose in the image, this would make the most sense to me. So that is where I think the San Francisco best digging location would be. And there's some other information in the back of the book. Isadora Duncan is referenced. So is it in the back of the book directly? And where was she mentioned that? Let's see. Well, I'll go through these in order. Isadora Duncan was mentioned in the back of the book. She has a lot to do with San Francisco and specifically this area. There was a marker erected in 1973. The daughter of California pioneers, America's genius of dance, was born on this site. So there's the site where Isadora Duncan was born is located right here in Nob Hill. And the Hotel Winton is also very close to this location, about 500 feet away. And in the back of the book, there's a picture of somebody blowing a jazz horn. I don't know if this is Wynton Marsalis or who this is. But anyway, so Angela Isadora Duncan was born in 1877. She studied ballet, certain technique. She also has a connection to Chicago. She met Augustin Daly soon after Duncan joined his touring company, and she was in the one of the fairies in Midsummer's Night Dream, and she was also a geisha girl. The interesting thing about Isadore Duncan, and this is why I think this is something that probably is important because, well, not that because Byron Preiss died in a car accident, but because Isadora Duncan died in a car accident. On September, the scarf she was wearing gets tangled in the rear hubcaps of an open car. Uh, so anyway, she was in Nice, France when this happened. Uh, anyway, just a little bit of information there. The other thing about Tony Bennett, uh, I Left My Heart in San Francisco, is a song by Tony Bennett. Now, I was looking some more at the Screaming Mimi, and I don't know if those leaves are heart shaped or not. Maybe they're not heart shaped, and maybe I don't leave my heart in San Francisco because of that. But anyway, another interesting thing in this area, and it might help explain uh, the wood. Uh, it seems like Byron liked to pull stuff from the turn of the century, such as the Vanzetti trial that happened in, you know, the riot of Paul Revere, the historical parts, if you will. Well, there was a man who built a 40-foot spike fence around his neighbor's home. And it's an interesting story where he hated this guy. And just as in Boston, we featured a bunch of graves on a hill and Copp's Hill, burying ground. We have a mortician here. Nicholas Young considered himself a lucky man. He was a German who immigrated to the United States in 1848. He worked hard to carve out a living for himself as a mortuary owner in San Francisco. So we have a mortuary connection to the Boston puzzle with Copp's Hill and the trial of Vanzetti. And anyway, uh, the business allowed him for him and his wife Rosina. Uh, Everything's coming up roses here, folks. They purchased a modest lot on top of California Street in the Nob Hill every day. But the problem was his neighbor, Charles Crocker, was very petty. And he put this wall up. It was um, basically put up 40 feet high around three sides of this guy's house. So the only thing he ever saw was wood. And so this young guy, the wooden fence towered over three sides of the home. It was 40 foot tall and acted like a window shade, bottling out the sun and cool air and immersing Young in darkness. Wow, talk about a fortress north, cold as glass. Certainly no glass to see through a window there. This was appropriately called a spike fence. Young threatened to install a flagpole that would fly a skull and crossbones, an act of defiance that might help blight Crocker's view. He also wanted to place a coffin on his roof, ostensibly for advertising his business, but clearly to agitate Crocker. He had some members of the media on his side who condemned Crocker's crime. Anyway, it was a big thing. The pro-labor Working Men's Party of California protested Crocker. And eventually, the spike fence was ordered to be torn down. Anyway, his widow continued to rebuff offers to sell the vacant land. Anyway, it's just an interesting story about San Francisco. Okay, so I was going to give you the addressing information here of the 982. Take me to the 982. So 1000, the addressing information for like this area is you are just starting at the 900 to 100 block transition at Mason Street. Don't know if that helps anybody taking you to the 982 or not. We talked briefly about the Mark Hopkins Hotel, which I believe is pictured in the background. It's $230 per night on Expedia right now if you want to book your flight and go pick up your treasure. I gave you the pretty much the exact coordinates of where that would be. The interesting thing is the Room of Dawns is a California history. It's 97-foot high panels painted by artist Maynard Dixon and Frank Von Stone. This won't help you solve the puzzle. It's just interesting stuff. One panel shows the Queen Calafia and her Amazons set against a gold leaf sky. Of course, this is who California is named after. I'm not sure if the design in the background in the image is a tortoise shell or not. It could be. It might be just that it's silver ignats, and we're trying to point out the Silver Kings. Let's see. So I was going to give you my confirmations from the back of the book. So my first one was, Mater Demons, obviously, are where you can find your hotels. The other thing is that those round dots in the background, maybe they are just Sears dollar pancakes, because there's this famous Sears dollar pancakes that's pretty adjacent to this area. The Sweat Sylphs chapter, I believe this guy, Milton Teague, is over here. I believe that's about Richard Simmons, and he was famously a Mater Demon. He opened a place called the Sweat Asylum, and the Sweating to the Oldies fad. This cherub in this page here has an interesting distinction. Looks a little bit like the guy at the fountain, if you will. This was identified as being something in New York, but if you go to the flood fountain in San Francisco, if you're bookending it, there's the figures in Huntington Park look very, very much like that. Talked about the Screaming Mimi. We also talked about how the Screaming Mimi appears to be, by a staircase going in that direction. Now, I'm basing this on the fact that I think maybe the Screaming Mimi is Constance Flood. And Constance Flood, you would probably need to read about the curious case of Constance Flood. But there's a fountain in Huntington Park that's named after her, illegitimate father, because, this might be a good time to talk about Constance Flood. So here's the whole story of Constance Flood and how it came to be. So James Clare Flood, there's a fountain, and the Flood Mansion is in this area. So his mansion became the boys' club where everyone met. James Clare Flood had a son named James Leary Flood. While she was appearing at a San Francisco dance hall, James Leary Flood, considered a playboy by some, fell in love with Marie Rosina Rose Fritz, a dancer who had been with the Victoria Loftus British Blondes. The Blondes were known as having brought burlesque to the United States. Rose, who in 1870 Lexington Lafayette, Missouri census is known as a 9-year-old girl and is reported as a runaway. She was using the name Violet Elwood. Well, there's a wood that no lion would fear. Well, anyway, Violet Elwood, otherwise known as Rosina Fritz, ends up dancing her way at the with the stage name as Petey, and worked at the Bella Union, a burlesque house that was located in at 805 Kearney. Uh, well, anyway, James Leary Flood ended up going to her show and liked what he saw. And I guess he liked it a lot because he chased it around Europe and eventually came back, and his family didn't really like the fact that he married a showgirl. Uh, and so Rosina becomes the wife of Flood. Oh, but there's more. Because good old Leary liked to philander with the other women. And he ended up meeting and fathering Constance May. And the girl, Constance May, was raised as James Leary's child for a while. Well, eventually, his first wife, Maud, died. And Maud had a sister. And by this time, I guess Flood kind of liked his wife's sister. And so he marries his wife's sister, who is 18 years younger. Meanwhile, this Constance, which he'd illegitimately fathered, had been living in the Flood home. Well, I guess Maud's sister, I guess, didn't really like the daughter, so they sent Constance to the Ramona Convent in San Gabriel, Los Angeles. And she lived there, and Constance's mother hit up Flood for money from time to time because Flood actually knew that this was his illegitimate daughter and continued to support them. And eventually, they did away with her, sent her to the convent. And this is when it was discovered that while Constance believed that her mother was Rose, through some research, she found out that her mother was actually a woman by the name of Eudora Ellen Ford, another music hall girl, who was herself an actress daughter. And through this discovery, she found out that her mother was, in fact, extorting money, basically, from James Leary Flood to assist with her being raised. Well, all this was fine and good until Maud died, and Constance got cut out of the will. And Constance felt that she was the legitimate daughter of James Leary Flood. And so, as the daughter, she wanted her inheritance. And it went to court. And it was just in Boston, there was the trial of the century, very, very close to where the treasure was found. Here we have another trial of the century. And in fact, it was a big scandal when it came to the trial. The jury got nullified and the judge basically said, okay, I've heard all the evidence. She probably is the child, but we're not giving her anything. Well, it got appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court. And there were articles published that assumed that Rose was Constance's mother. One such article, the Eden Journal of California Garden and Landscape History Society, Volume 9, Number 3, took up this case and published the information about the deal. So anyway, eventually she ended up getting her settlement. But the whole point is that the fountain in Huntington Park has a history, and the history dates back and goes back to Rose flood. We can talk a little bit about the Crocker Mansion. Again, another landmark in this area. Um, Isadora Duncan. Talked a little bit about Isadora Duncan. All right, going through the back of the book, looking at some of the other things that may tell us that San Francisco and that location I'm showing you by the staircase might be the right location. So we all remember this one, the Painted Ladies, right? So Ben Asen has given us some information about this, and you know, I'm kind of wondering if you compare the shape of that horn to the fountain, the flood fountain, or is that a whistle blows? I don't know. Do you correlate verse matches in the verses to the blowing of the horn in the back of the book as a clue to what verse to use for what image? I don't know. Can you make that stretch? Um, Maybe you can make that stretch. That you're supposed to use the horn blowing, the San Francisco, and all of this. I don't know. Greil Marcus is mentioned by name in the back of the book. And so, you have to consider the possibility that maybe something about Greil Marcus being born in San Francisco, writing for a Rolling Stone. His father died on the USS Hall as a second commander of the boat. And the story, the Cane Mutiny, is based upon this. And also Mystery Train. Well, there's a set of train tracks that goes right down California. That's a trolley train track, but who's to quibble about that? So the next one is Randolph Hearst, was talked about in the San Francisco Examiner in this chapter. And I'm looking at The Nightmare, a harmless but highly publicized urban terrorist. Not sure anything other than the fact that we're talking about William Hearst, the San Francisco Examiner. Who can resist the Tinkerbells and not trying to make some relationship between the Tinkerbells and, the Tinkerbells? I kind of think that looks like something in that Grace Cathedral, that the window image in the Grace Cathedral. I kind of feel like that. And remember, I mentioned a building around the Huntington that looks a lot like that. I remember when we talked about the bells being these ladies, at which Rosie Crocker, or not Rosie Crocker, Rosie Flood, and Rosie Flood's real name was Elwood. But I think that that could be matched to something around Huntington Park. The next one is the Post Monster General chapter. And in the Post Monster General chapter, it says the following: when a pizza store owner in California receives a personal note of condolence from Isadora Duncan. Well, we talked about Isadora Duncan. Isadora's father, I think, died on a steamboat. Isadora Duncan performed for King Louis. She eventually lived on Park Avenue. and she invented a dance named Whirlwinds of Danger. I think there's like 4 clues in there to other puzzles. But I'm wondering if this Isidore Duncan thing has to do with a pizza-shaped location. So in other words, if you know Isidore Duncan has a relationship to a San Francisco puzzle, and that the text in the back says, when a pizza store owner in California receives a personal note of condolence from Isidore Duncan. I'm wondering if we're looking for a triangular shaped spot, like that corner by those steps. I don't know. Again, I just make observations. I have no actual experience putting my shovel in the ground, digging for anything. Let's see. I think I've pretty much covered what I wanted to, but if you want to go to my dig spot, I am going to give you it right now. So according to the Historical Markers Database Organization, my actual spot would be at 37.791696 and minus 122.412335. Let me repeat that again. My actual dig spot for San Francisco is at 37.791696 minus 122.412335. And if you go back to the Postmaster General chapter, where is that? Just a second. I'll find it. It matches exactly. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That one would be 555555555 986 982 74 blah 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 blah. So I'm just saying that these puzzles, I think, are simpler than we give it credit for. Complicating this by mixing the matching and stuff like that makes it more difficult. Okay, so going back to the puzzle itself. Let's just say that the Fortress North, cold as glass, is the top of the mark. Hopkins Hotel. That's in the distance. Friendship South, take your task to the number 982. Go to 982 California Avenue. Through the wood, no lion appears. Dead wood, I don't care. What wood you use. Don't even care what lion you use. Because it could be tiger wood. Could be dead wood. It could be just the spike fence wood. It doesn't matter. I'm going to throw that one out because in the sky, the water veers. This is the main fountain in Huntington Park. Small of scale. Take a look at the image figure lips and the rose petals of this fountain. Take a look at the scaly head of the fish in this fountain. Small of scale. Scale. Fish. Fish. Scales. Look at it. Maybe all that background information in the image is just scale. I don't know what it is. Step across. Perspective should not be lost. In the center of 4 light, small split. There's 4 seashells there. Seashell usually has a small split. That's the pearl in the image. 3 winged and slight. Okay, where are we going from here? Go look at the cherubs. There's 3 cherubs at the flood fountain. There's winged cherub. What is a cherub? What is a cherub? It's an angel. three-winged and small. What we take to be our strongest tower of delight falls gently in December night. I don't care what you use as the tower here. You can loot. I don't know if you can see the Coit Tower from here. I don't know if you can see the trans whatever uh, pyramid. Uh, it doesn't really matter. It could be your tower of delight is simply the Huntington billboard because the G and the H, some of those letters are in there. But there's the spout, a whistle sounds. Now, there is a water tank in this general area. There could have been a water fountain in this park at any point in time since 1980, 81. But it's going to be in that corner of the park where the James Flood monument is, where there's steps leading up to that fountain from the Huntington Hotel doorway across the street. A whistle sounds, I think that means it's a trolley stop. That's where the trolley stop was. And all you had to do is go to the concrete perimeter fence that has a similar detail as the Screaming Mimi and find yourself a dig spot right there. I like the one where the Screaming Mimi is, and I gave you the GPS coordinates for that spot already. Now, caveat number 6537982 is that I don't know if that stairway was there at the time. I don't know what the flora was at that location at the time. But if you walk along that fence, you will notice that the perimeter fence has these also little spouts where the water drains out of that embankment back onto the sidewalk. And that might be the spout that they're talking about. Oh, I made a rhyme. Huh, that was pretty cool. Anyway, so I think that using verse number 1 with image number 1 makes more sense. And let's just do this again and look for elements that might make sense here. Let's just look at the image for a second. Okay, and let's compare it to the verse. The fortress north. Doesn't it look like there's something at the top of the image that's a fortress type thing? Cold as glass. Friendship south. Take your tasks tonight. Through the wood. What is that in the background of this lady in the image figure? What is all of that in the background? Is it charred wood? Is it dead wood? Is it the 1906 fire that destroyed all the wood? I don't know. But the verse makes sense if you use verse number 1 to explain elements in the image itself. In the sky, the water veers. What if this image is simply a bunch of water droplets in the sky, making a veering type of pattern? What if it's as simple as saying that, oh, in the sky, the water veers. Oh, I see that in the image. Smallest scale, step, a cross. Look, there's a cross. Her arms form a perfect cross with the dress. In the center of 4 legs, small split, 3-winged and slight, what we take to be our strongest tower of delight falls gently in December night. I mean, there's at least image elements of verse number 1 in the image number 1. This has been proven with the solve for Cleveland. With the solve for Cleveland, this has also been shown to be correct. You've got to unlock your imagination. You have to unlock your coupling to the PB Works, to the other people who are talking about the secret, to the possibility that these puzzles are simple and that verse 1 matches image 1, just like Cleveland's verse matches the verse. Image 4 was matched to verse number 4. It was matched. It wasn't any more difficult than to match verse 4 to image number 4. In Boston, they're using the wrong verse and the wrong image. They just made up shit about that one. Now, open yourself up to the possibility that in Chicago, the solve was not actually presented the way it should be, and it should have used a different verse. And if you're able to use verse 12 for puzzle number 12, you then maybe can go back to New York and come up with a solve that makes sense. But I doubt that we'll get Eric, Bob, Danny, or David to admit that they possibly may have used the wrong verse for their solve, because it would be too simple to have just matched image number 5 with verse number 5 and used the street addressing information of lane 222 Jackson Street. You'll see an arc of lights, which is the blue beehive structure on the Metropolitan Building in formerly the Britannica Building. Why do you think when that was the Britannica Building, we had in the back of the book the nomenclature? Because that matched the arc of lights that you were going to see on the Britannica Building, not the Metropolitan Building. Together save this. Weight and roots extended together save this sign. Of granite walls and windswept halls. Gee, many Christmas. If you go to 222 Jackson Street and you look around, all you see is granite walls. A wind-swept hall. All you have to do is look at the train tunnels right there at that location. That's a windswept hallway. You basically have the hallway is all the train tracks that go basically below the site. It's a big freaking hallway. Wind. There's a freaking windmill in the image that you used to solve the puzzle. But you didn't use the verse that had a windswept citadel in the night. A wingless bird ascended. A wingless bird is a rail. A wingless bird is a rail that was born of ancient dreams of flight. Now, this is where you have to get into knowing the history of Chicago and knowing that in this general area of the railroad, the Central Illinois Railroad had a major problem where one train, which was a wingless bird, ascended over the back of the other train. Anyway, okay. Born of ancient, beneath the only standing member of a forest to the south. Okay. Which is the tallest trees? These trees in 1981, there was one big tree right by the dig site. There was a bunch of little trees planted. These trees were like, I don't know, probably 5 feet tall. The other tree in the historical photographs of Chicago show that one big tree was at least 40 feet tall. And there was a forest of smaller trees to the south. The white stone was closest. Yeah, the little white stone that capped the railing along the park wall. 12 paces from that stone. 12 paces from that white stone. Get permission to dig out. Getting permission is a grant. You need to get a grant to dig it out of Grant Park. Okay, so now I've just illustrated the methodology of matching verse 5 to image number 5 works. And if you then can unlock the M and B verse and use it for New York, you can easily find where M and B are set in stone. Could be the Manhattan and Brooklyn. Under Congress, R is known, L sits, L being the L. I don't know, could be Lindsay, the mayor. It could be Alphabet City that you're talking about. Then you can use beyond his shoulder is a Fair Folks treasure holder. That could be, oh, gee, wouldn't that be the Statue of Liberty? And maybe the L that sits between M and B is the Liberty? And that maybe in image 12, many people think, well, gee, doesn't that kind of look like a feminized version of the Statue of Liberty? Liberty, liberty, liberty. Oh, so that would make sense then, wouldn't it? That if you can actually use the Statue of Liberty, and you can use the Manhattan and Brooklyn, and maybe there's a Congress Bridge. I don't know. I don't know about New York. Maybe this opens up Central Park. But I guess Balto will sit humbly in Central Park and never be investigated as a location, because somebody said that somebody said that somebody said that Byron said that there's no treasure cask in Central Park. Somebody said, somebody said, somebody said. Eric, Rob, Danny, David, don't know which one of you found that somebody said, somebody said, somebody said. Or anybody else. Nobody will give me the origin of that. But if I could simply use rumble, brush, and music, hush, Balto, I would give you a location in New York that makes perfect sense based upon what the image has in it, based upon what the verse has in it. Complications caused by image 5 being matched with verse number 12. And I'm not even going to go with these people in Boston who don't even have the right verse or the right image, and just made up some bullshit story about where they looked. Because it makes more sense that if you look at the image of the lion, image number 2, if you just look at it, just look at the image and go at a place where jewels abound, 15 rows to the ground. Okay, the guy blatantly admits that he went to Boston because he thought that there were some steps involved, and there was water involved. So he found a place where there's some steps. Well, go count the steps on Cops Hill Terrace. On the right, coming down from the steps would be the left hand. The left-hand stairway from Cops Hill Terrace has 15 rows down to the ground from Cops Terrace. All right? In the middle of 21, from end to end. Where was this at? Was it at the West End? Okay, it was at the West End. Only 3 stand watch. I grew up in 1980, 81. We used to have this joke that about 3 standing watch, and it was a baseball joke. And the 3 of the people that stood watch are the pitcher. No, not the pitcher. The 3 that stood watch were the batter and the umpire and the pitcher. Okay. At the sound of friends fills the afternoon airs. Here's a sovereign people. Well, there's 2 dugouts. Baseball is an afternoon game, and they built palaces to shelter their heads for a night. Yeah, let's see. Why do dugouts have fences or roofs on them? Why do you not park your car very close to the ball diamond, especially behind the dugout? Oh, because you don't want those balls to hit them. Gnomes admire phase delight, the namesakes meeting near this site. Go look at the picture of home plate in image number 2 that has the bocce ball courts on it, that has a softball pitcher's mat. Okay, I said baseball. We're actually talking about softball. We're not talking about baseball. We're talking about softball, because the Suffolk field is where they played softball. for the ladies. So you've got all the elements in this of the molasses flood. That's the pear exploding in image number 2. You have the woman ascending to heaven with angel wings. You have the lion's head, which is in the background because those 2 lions are in front of the Old North Church. And then the death mask, where you have the 2 football eyes that are dead, represent Mr. Andy Papulo. And Mr. Andy Papulo Park, died as a result of his buddy Charlie Kay getting in an altercation with a hooker that stole his wallet. And if you don't have a hooker in that image number 2, I don't know what you're looking for. I honestly don't know what you're looking for in that. And so you actually have a home plate. You have the 3 colors of a bocce ball court. The bocce ball courts are right there in Boston. And you have an exploding pear because you had the molasses flood, which there's a thing that talks about the molasses flood there. And you have the headstones in the ears of the lion representing Copp's Hill. And you have the cuffs on the woman in the image number 2 that are showing their handcuffed, Copp's cuffing Hill. It just doesn't make sense. The story that was presented just does not make sense for the Boston solve. When you have all the elements of the location represented in image number 2 of the home plate, bocce ball courts, the sugar pear exploding, the death mask for the tombstones in the ear, all of it's right there. Just as in the Cleveland solve, you have the Rockefeller. I could go into the details that those people missed as well. But I guess I'll say that for another show. There's so much that's been missed in all of these images, 4 and 5. You know, there's so many things that have been missed that are cues from the back of the book that are from the language that if somebody would just listen, I'm sure a group of people could get together and not be looking at Herman Park. The 982 train. How long are you guys going to ride that? Because the train had a 982 number on it. I mean, honest to God, how long are you going to go with that? And not start looking at alternative uses for that verse. And alternative cities, by the way. Well, I don't know when a water tower became a rocket. I'm going to explain image number 8 a little bit better for people. What do the following have in common? A round blue structure on the top of a pole. A camel on top of a pole. And a rhinoceros on the top of a pole. Well, one of them's a water tower. The other one has water in its hump. And the third one lives primarily around water. I don't understand how those are rockets. I don't understand it. Rockets are used to. I don't get it. I guess I grew up with the wrong era. I was born in the 60s. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. The problem that most of the people who are presenting the solve ideas for The Secret is that none of them actually were around when the treasure book came out and don't have the historical perspective required to solve these puzzles. They don't even know what Chappaquiddick is. They don't remember when Michael Rockefeller went missing and got ate by the Asmat tribe. Well, who's that? Well, you've got a solve that has to do with the Rockefellers And you didn't care to learn that Michael Rockefeller was thought to be eaten by the Aztecs. And if you look at the structure of the brick facade, that it's a bunch of fish, flesh-eating fish called piranhas. Okay, go Google a picture of piranhas, and then start looking at the fireplace image. I'm just going to call it the fireplace image. In that image, and then just now start looking at the horse and see how it's segmented up into a bunch of pieces, and how that's a boyish figure. Well, yeah, it's a boyish figure with a pith helmet. Have you ever seen a picture of Michael Rockefeller in his pith helmet? No, you probably haven't. He's not a doughboy. He was an adventurer. He's trying to document the lifestyle of the Asmat tribe. And he either got eaten by the Asmats. You guys think that that funny thing in the middle of the fireplace is a clown? Why don't you go look at what the traditional Asmat face painting appearance is of an Asmat warrior? And then start looking for the Pisces fish, and go from there. And there's all kinds of eyeballs in that image, as little round things, or fish eyeballs. Well, anyway, you notice how the legs are all severed into different pieces there, and yeah, that's a pith helmet. The guy was looking for stuff. Granted, you have to have the wall, you have to have the pillars to get you. That doesn't have as much to do with the Asmats as the rest of the clown face in the image, and the boyish figure, who's a Rockefeller. Anyway, all right, folks. I've had my 1 hour show on The Secret. Hope everybody's having a great day. If you want to hit me up with any of these ideas, you can reach me on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your indulgence. Have a great day.